The 18th century was a time of dynamic change and growth, the first stirrings of the Industrial Revolution, of empire, of enlightenment. Olney, though, was described by one contemporary as being filled with the half-starved and ragged of the earth, a market town of hard-working but low-paid artisans and impoverished lace workers. When John Newton first came to Olney in 1764 as its newly ordained priest, he found the people mostly poor, the country low and dirty. He quickly got to know his parishioners, visiting their homes, basing his sermons on what he learned about their lives, and organising meetings for adults and children alike. His popularity grew, and soon a new balcony had to be built in the church to accommodate the growing number of parishioners and visitors. John Newton became a celebrated hymn writer and theologian, but he had not always been a man of faith. He discovered this in 1748 when he had a moment of profound revelation during a dangerous storm at sea. Newton's time at sea, both working on and even captaining slave ships, led him to become a prominent abolitionist. He later wrote about these experiences in his book, An Authentic Narrative. It was this book that brought him to the attention of Lord Dartmouth, who was instrumental in bringing him to his curacy here in Olney. What makes John Newton such a powerful and distinctive voice in the campaign to abolish the slave trade is that he was drawing from personal experience, as recorded in the authentic narrative. His later interventions include his personal and spiritual support of William Wilberforce, who was the leading voice of the abolition movement in Parliament, his sensational and highly influential pamphlet, Thoughts upon the African Slave Trade, testimony delivered to parliamentary select committees, and later his ministry in London to bankers and merchants fueling the trade. Besides his work as an abolitionist, John Newton is best known today for writing the hymn Amazing Grace. This was part of the Olney hymns, the fruits of a collaboration between John Newton and the poet William Cowper. William Cowper was one of the most popular and significant poets of the late 18th century. Prone to severe bouts of melancholy, Cowper found useful employment and distraction in writing, and often remarked his funniest verse were written during times of deepest sadness. An example of this is the diverting history of John Gilpin, a comic ballad written in this very room. It tells the story of a draper, a citizen of credit and renown, who is carried out of town on a bolting horse and goes on a wild journey before finally arriving late and bedraggled to his anniversary dinner with his wife. "So fair and softly, John," he cried. But John he cried in vain. That trot became a gallop soon, in spite of curb and rein. So stooping down, as needs he must, who cannot sit upright, he grasped the mane with both his hands and heaved with all his might. He originally wrote it to make himself and a few friends laugh, but it soon saw its way into publication anonymously. And, as Cowper remarked, soon the whole world laughed with them. It helped make Cowper a household name. Cowper's masterpiece was The Task, and although it is not widely read today, it did a huge amount to cement his reputation as a serious poet in his own time. Cowper had been looking for a subject to write about when his friend, Lady Austen, gave him the task of writing about this sofa. This extended meditation was not only a success in its own right, but also gave Cooper the skills he needed to translate Homer's Iliad and Odyssey later in his life. Cooper did much of his work here at this desk, but also in his summer house, which he called his verse manufactory. As Cooper found success as a poet, abolitionists seized upon passages in the Task, railing against the slave trade. As a result, several people, including John Newton, approached him, asking he write poems specifically in support of the cause. One of these pieces, A Negro's Complaint, was printed in A Subject for Conversation and Reflection at the Tea Table. This pamphlet, and many like it, were a big part of the campaign to win hearts and minds across the country to the cause of abolition. Both Cooper and Newton were prolific letter writers, and their friendship and collaboration was not limited to the 12 years that they lived and worked together in Olney, but continued for the rest of Cooper's life. In fact, the last surviving letter we have from William Cooper was addressed to John Newton in 1799, the year before his death. Here at the Cowper and Newton Museum, walk back in time through the home of William Cooper to discover more fascinating stories about the lives and works of these extraordinary men.